here and coming in, how many are you familiar with the Christian Community Development Association and their approach? Raise your hands, don't be shy. Sammy, do you know? Have you heard of that? Have you heard about this?
Yeah. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. Okay, great. So I know some of you are and some of you aren't. Some of you may have been exposed to it in a little bit and maybe have this will be a refresher. Some of you, this will be a time to take a nap. Some of you, this will be brand new and something exciting to learn more about. So it will be very remedial if you've been around it a long time. It will be very exciting and refreshing if you've never heard it before. And it will be a refresher if you've kind of been around it a little bit. But a lot of what we've talked about and what we've heard from the stories of people have been a manifestation, kind of the results of these core principles that people have really operated out of and have included into the daily practice of their life. And so this is what we're all about. Christian community development. So there are 8 foundational principles to this philosophy of development. The philosophy or the theory of development is not a specifically Christian theory. It's something that sociologists and practitioners have developed. It's really about expanding the real freedoms and opportunities of community members in a community. It's giving opportunity. It's creating an environment of empowerment so that people, it's not relief. Relief is immediate aid. It's that Band-Aid. It's that setting of the broken arm that you need right away when there's emergency help needed. You go in and you're relief. Development is to prevent the breaking of those limbs and the cutting of that skin. It is the creating an environment, a community in which there can be flourishing, in which there can be health, and in which the community can be a self-sustaining, life-giving, peaceful place. That's really the goal of development. And so, as a development practitioner, you are wanting to work yourself out of a job. You should not want to be there doing the same thing forever. You may be doing it forever, but it shouldn't be because you're not raising up leaders and attempting to empower the community to be able to meet some of their own needs. And so that's a core principle. So that's development. Christian community development brings in a few unique components. So let's go through them. There's 8 principles, 3 foundational core principles that were from the beginning developed by John Perkins. John Bolton mentioned him, but a man who grew up in Mississippi during when racism was, Jim Crow was in full effect. Racism, Ku Klux Klan were hanging African Americans. His brother was killed during that by racists. He escaped that setting and did everything he could to get out of it. He brought his family to California. One of his children got saved in a background Bible club and brought him to know the Lord. And through that process, he felt that God was calling him to return to the place that he hated and to the context that caused him so much pain. And he returned. It's a 3rd grade education or something, low like that. And he returned. He began to live and work in the community. And out of his work, he developed what he calls the 3 R's. And this is kind of the beginning of the 8 principles. It's been an evolving thing. 3 R's are relocation, reconciliation, and redistribution. Those are the fundamental first core principles out of which the all 8 kind of arise. Can you see behind me? Okay. So first, let me just explain these quickly. Relocation. Christian community development is based on what Enrique just called us to. That you are neighbors with the people that you serve, that you live among them. It takes the theological statement about Jesus taking on flesh and dwelling among us. He moved into the neighborhood, as it says in John 1:1. Loose translation, took on flesh, moved into the neighborhood. And it makes that not only a theological statement, but a statement of mission. It's how we do what we do. It's how we bring the good news. It's how God brought the good news. He came and lived among us. So it's relocation. It changes the statement, we're going to help them, to we are us. It's not us and them, it is us together. Neighbors, it's our community, not their community. We are taking ownership. Now there's three kinds of relocation that have kind of developed. All right, there's three kind of relocators. There's the type of person like my wife and I, who did not grow up in this community, or did not grow up in the same struggles, and we decided by conviction we want to come and relocate and plant ourselves in the community, and to learn from our neighbors and to be neighbors and to serve the community alongside our neighbors. That's a relocator. Then there's a returner. A returner is what we is someone who did grow up in the community, and either they viewed it as they escaped. This is John Perkins. He viewed it as he escaped. He was trying to get a better life. He went to California, but then he decided, I have to return. I have to take the skills that I've developed and the calling that I've been given and invest in my community and replant myself. So there's a returner. This also speaks to those who maybe have always intended to remain in the community, but they go away maybe to receive education or training or some such life experience, and they then return. And then the third is a remainer. A remainer is a Lydia that we heard from the very beginning. There's someone who grew up in the community and just never left and chooses to remain for the good of the community, chooses to invest into the lives of the people that she's known all of her life. So that is a remainer. We need all three, and the job of community development is to recognize and to nurture all three of these so that we can work together to develop a community. All right, so that's relocation. Reconciliation. This is based on the principle that the Christian peace is that Christ has come to reconcile the world to himself, that the church has been given the ministry of reconciliation. Reconciliation, the relationship between humanity and God has been severed by sin, broken, and so we endeavor to reconcile God and humanity, but also that the relationships horizontally have been damaged, broken by sin. There's injustice, and there's violence, and there's strife. And so we seek to build up reconciliation between people. But it also extends to races and classes, people group to people group. We believe that reconciliation needs to occur for societies, for there to be a development. And then people to creation. You saw the urban farm. The relationship between humanity and creation and the earth has been broken. And so we endeavor to produce and bring about through Christ reconciliation, that we live in a healthy way with the good creation that God made and said is good. And so that is reconciliation. It builds on relocation as we are in the community and we see the conflict and we work it out with them and build on reconciliation, toward reconciliation. Redistribution. Now, who loves that word? That word has a lot of baggage with it. But what is meant here is it builds on this idea of relocation and reconciliation, that when we move into the neighborhood and we are willing to pour in, share our gifts and our resources with the people that we live among, that is an act of redistribution. It is a gift. It is a gifting of our skills, our resources, our abilities, and for the good of the community. Also, it recognizes that there is some injustice in the system. John Perkins is fond of saying that there's a popular term, that phrase, if you give a man a fish, you teach him to fish for you give him a fish. Hey, how's it go? Oh, man.
He eats for a day.
He eats for a day. You teach a man to fish.
He eats for a lifetime.
He eats for a lifetime. But there's one step. He wants to take that one step further. Who owns the pond? Who has access to the pond? Can he even fish? You can teach someone to fish, but if he's not allowed to fish, if the fish is being polluted by something and the fish are dead, that's a systemic issue. That's a problem that goes beyond personal choice and personal skill and the will to work or whatever it may be. And so we have to address it from a systemic level as well. So there's, I'm going to get a little fancy and technical here, just really quick. There's a term called social capital. Social capital is the relationships, the horizontal relationships that we have that enable us to survive in difficult situations or to thrive. If my family went through a pretty difficult time when I was growing up, unemployment and bankruptcy and things like that. But one reason we never dipped down into just desperate poverty is because we had social capital. We had relationships with people, family that had some resources, people that loaned us money, things like that. We had relationships, churches, people that would bring food to us and things like that. So the relationships were what sustained us. So people need social capital. They need horizontal relationships, but they also need bridging capital. Especially when you're talking about a poor community, you can be like super close and have a strong network and you know, you can sing Kumbaya and everything's great and that's necessary, you need it. But you need some bridging capital too. Someone with resources to extend a hand, banks to loan money to under-resourced areas, health clinics to come in and doctors to lend their time, as happens with the health clinic, businesses who are willing to invest in a community and set up shop. That's bridging capital. So this is what we mean by redistribution. It's when you have bonding and bridging capital, it equals an environment of empowerment, a place where the community can begin to thrive. So that's the first three. Can you say them together? The 3 R's? We got it? First one? What? Relocation? Reconciliation. And then the third? Redistribution. Okay, so fourth, leadership development. Leadership development. This is not about the big white guy with a beard coming into a community and doing things, okay? This is not at all what it's about. It is about, again, relocation, reconciliation, redistribution, and it is about leadership development. It is about seeing the gifts that are already latent in the community, seeing the people that are already there, and recognizing those leaders, nurturing those leaders, cultivating and equipping those leaders so that they are the ones doing the work and they are the ones leading the community. So next slide real quick. Let me show you a cycle of leadership development that kind of describes the process. And for this cycle to fully take place, they say it takes about 15 years. All right, usually that's why a lot of development agencies start with youth programs. But first, the leader's identified. You got to identify the leader, and you got to see the strengths in people. They're not just a passive recipient of services, but they are someone with strength and resiliency. So you identify that kid or that person who's already a leader in the community, and then you nurture that. You nurture those gifts. You nurture what God has already given them. You provide training and resources and support. And then you support them or send them so they become supported. So the agency I work with in Waco, Texas, has a guy who got involved in the theater program. He had gifting to do theater. He ended up, Mission Waco supported him to go to college to get training in theater. Then he got a scholarship to this theater in New York. And that guy has become a returner to begin teaching theater in Waco in the same neighborhood. But they supported him. They equipped him to go out. So that's maybe when they go out, they receive training, education. But then we want them to, we would love for them to catch a heart and a vision to become a returner. So you see how it begins to turn. They return. They have a heart for the community and for their neighbors. Then they become a remainer. They're going to stay there. We got a guy like Enrique and a woman like Joanne who's been here for 20 and 30 years. They're a remainer. And then they become a reproducer. They begin the cycle over again. And they identify their leaders. They nurture them. And then you have development taking place. All right, so that's leadership development. Listening to the community. You heard Enrique talk about people, well, we want to do community gardens. It's super cool. Let's do it. Let's build community gardens. All right, let's go tell the community what they need to do is start building community gardens. It's really cool. Everyone's doing it these days, you know. And so let's go knock on the doors and say, hey, what you need to do is grow a community garden. Well, that's missing a step. That's great. But is that a felt need of the community? Is that a desire that they have? Is that a core principle of the CCDA that's not a core principle, but a mantra, is that people with a problem have to be part of the solution, and the people are the experts in fixing their own problems. They have the solutions, they have the knowledge, they know their community, they know their struggles, they just may not have the resources to pull it off. And so we become, it's that bridging capital again. And so, listen, look, leverage. I mean, when anyone moves into community, the first thing they should do is listen. Shut the mouth, open the ears. Listen, look. What is it that what are the strengths of your community? These are questions you can ask. What are the strengths of your neighborhood? What are people good at? What do you love to do? What, if you could imagine this neighborhood being everything you would want to be for your children, what would that be? And let them tell you their story. Let them tell you their dreams. Let them tell you their hopes. And from that, you begin to build and implement a program in conjunction, in partnership with the people. It's not something you bring to the table. And so in this is this idea of asset community development. And I'm going to pass it around. Would you just pass that around? One is a full report, and then the other is kind of a snapshot. But one thing I've done at Mission Waco, they're building a nonprofit grocery store. It's a food desert. And we have identified the assets, the strengths of that community in a 3 square mile block, 1.5 mile in each direction of the building that will be the grocery store. Things that might sustain it. If you look through that report, you'll see a map. We went through and identified with the community, said what are the strengths? What are some of the things that you go to for food or for resources? And we divide from the community, listen to the community. First of all, we heard that they wanted a grocery store. They walked 2.5 miles one way, 4 miles round trip to get fresh groceries. They take the bus, which takes 2 hours. And so they said, please bring a grocery store, fresh foods, we need it. And so we listened to the community, and then we said, well, what do you have in your midst that are already assets, strengths? We're not just looking at what you lack, but we are looking at what you have. And so we identified 105 assets in this little 3 square mile block. 3 square miles is not very big. 1 mile each direction or so. 40 locally owned restaurants. 29 churches. 18 nonprofits. 8 bus stops. These are strengths and resiliencies that can then be connected to one another. So listen, look, learn, build on the strengths. You don't just go, they don't have this, they don't have that, they have this problem, that problem, that problem. Christian community development looks for the strengths and the assets already available in the community. They are the experts. They need to be the hero of their own story. 6. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, I forgot I had pictures of this. Look at this. Okay, go back real quick. I forgot I did that. That was great. So here is, this is the Jubilee Market right here, where it will be. It's called the Jubilee Food Market. This is 1 mile this way, 1 mile roughly. There's a river here. And these are the assets. You can see churches, schools, food business, nonprofits. What you do, the power of this, is not only does it say, look at that community, how it's typically, it's North Waco, highest poverty, highest obesity, highest cholesterol rate, high crime. Okay, that's one story. That's the need-based story. That's the lack story. This is the strength story. 29 churches, 40 local-owned businesses, 10 schools, private and public. Does that tell a different story? You need both stories. But if it's just the need-based story, the community just becomes passive recipients of service. They become something that you do to. You do something to rather than with. These assets then need to be connected and leveraged so that they can support each other and begin the solution to their own struggles. Church-based. There's the churches. Go next one. Church, and if you want more information on how to do it, ask that map, I can talk to you about it. Church-based, and this is distinctive, obviously, of the Christian community development. But church is central to the development of holistic, thriving communities. We truly believe that. You've heard that in many of the stories. We believe that the church is central because Christ is central to the church, and Christ is the change agent for the world. So I did a nice little diagram here. Can I show you? Here we go. So Karl Barth came up with this a little bit, but it's pretty intuitive. Christ dwells within the church. He has chosen the church is called his body. It is, as people might say, his hands and feet in this world as we are led and empowered by the Spirit. We have the ministry of reconciliation, as we talked about. So as Christ is in the church and the church is in the world, transformation flows from the center of that. So the Christian community development believes that the church has to be central to that work. It has to flow out of and from the church for redemption, transformation, and development to occur. So that is the church-based thing. And also, the next thing that is kind of related is, though, it is a holistic approach. This is principle number 7, holistic. The Christian community development rejects the idea of dualism. The Hebrew way of thinking, which is from the tradition from which Christian scriptures arise, and Jesus was a Jew and had a Hebrew mindset, is holistic. Shalom was what they believed God would bring about. Shalom is wholeness. It is the way things ought to be. It is that reconciliation. It is that harmony between man and God, or people and people, and people and creation. It is holistic. And so the Christian community development does not believe that, it believes it's all tied together. Salvation from sin and salvation from social and economic and political and cultural and emotional and physical and marital and judicial and educational and familial issues of each person. We want to address all of it. We believe that the gospel is good news, period. It is good news. The reign of God brings good news for the whole person. And so let me give you a little illustration. I call it the gospel copter, okay? Scott McKnight gives this illustration. To have a helicopter, can you call it a helicopter if I take away the propellers? Just humor me here. No. Can you have a helicopter if you just have propellers? No. Okay, so you need both, right? You need the propellers for it to be a helicopter that's functioning, and you need the bottom part, whatever that is, the cockpit or the body of the helicopter. All right, so in the same way, it's a kind of a uniquely American phenomenon, but in the 19th century or so, we began to, in response to the social gospel, or what we say, we're kind of losing Christ and that need for atonement, we said, well, the church kind of went one of two ways. It went to saying the gospel is just spiritual. What they meant by that is that it is salvation from sin to heaven, and by which they mean a place where your spirit goes after you die. And so there's this dualism, this separation of body and spirit, this idea that the earth is a place that will be destroyed and burned, and we get saved to escape this earth and go to heaven. And so the gap between when we're saved, what life becomes is a waiting game for Jesus to come back. And so we just kind of like huddle up in a holy huddle and just kind of chill out and try to like wait for Jesus to come back because this world is getting worse and worse. And so we believe it's personal salvation from sins only. The social gospel said, no, salvation doesn't have much to do with sins. It has to do with social sins. It has to do with poverty. It has to do with the brokenness of the world. And so that's the message we're going to proclaim. Well, it split at that time. What the Christian community development says, no, it's both. It's both. Jesus came in Luke 4 and said, he comes in the synagogue, his first message in Luke, he says, I have been anointed to proclaim good news to the poor. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to give sight to the blind, to proclaim release to the captives, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. The year of the Lord's favor is Jubilee. It's a year of release where land was given back to the original owners, where things were redistributed, and where slaves were set free every 7 years and every every 49 years. So the gospel copter, go back to that. If we say the propellers is this idea of the atonement, that Jesus Christ died for our sins and reconciles us to God and gains us entrance into heaven in an ultimate reality, saves our souls, yes, absolutely essential to the gospel. The gospel is not less than that. It's not less than that. But it also includes the whole person. It includes the giving sight to the blind. It includes the reconciliation of family members. It includes a freedom from addiction. It includes justice and peace and health. Just like Jesus proclaimed the kingdom, healing and casting out demons, and proclaiming himself to be the one, the Savior. So is this making sense? Can't have both. It's a helicopter. If you just have the propellers, if you just have spiritual salvation, forgiveness of sins, it doesn't have any impact on the world, you don't have a whole gospel. If you have a gospel that has no idea of personal sin and spiritual salvation, no gospel. You got to have the gospel copter. Okay? All right. It's holistic. Luke 4, 2 Corinthians 5:17, the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. All right. Last one, empowerment. Empowerment. Again, we are not about relief. Relief is necessary in times, but what has happened sometimes is that's all we exclusively do. And so we're just constantly putting Band-Aids on wounds, and we're never asking, well, where are the wounds coming from? People are just bleeding, their arms are getting cut off, they're broken. Well, what needs to be done? Empowerment is about acknowledging the dignity and worth and value of the human being that God has made in his image, with gifts and skills and abilities, and seeking to create an environment of empowerment, an environment in which they can use their gifts and their skills, where they have access to the pond, where they are taught how to fish in that pond, and then where they are able to eat and provide food for their families. So they derive this idea of empowerment from the three principles from the Old Testament welfare laws. If you want to write it down, Deuteronomy 24 and Leviticus 19. There's a provision for the poor, provision for the outcast and the vulnerable. Number one, so there were gleaning laws in the Old Testament where owners of fields would glean, harvest their produce, but they were commanded to leave the edges and the corners so that then people could come in behind, people who were without, people who were the vulnerable, widows, orphans, strangers, could come in and then pick food for their family. So the three principles here are, number one, there has to be an opportunity for people to get their needs met. That's the pond thing. Access to the pond, access to the field, leaving something, not just taking everything, maximizing the land for all that it's worth and sucking everything out of it and saying, well, everyone else, you fend for yourself. I learned how to maximize this land. It's leaving opportunity for people to get their needs met. Opportunities, access to jobs, all these things. The second thing is the person with need must be willing to work for it if they're able. Not everyone is able. There's many legitimate reasons why people cannot work. But the idea of empowerment is that the person who's willing to work and able to work ought to work. And we have to give them that opportunity. And the third is when 1 and 2 above happen, a person's dignity is affirmed. It's not dignifying to just be handed something. Relief isn't that dignifying, it's being given something, but we line people up and we say, all right, here, receive our charity. And who has the power in that situation? The person handing stuff out. What we're saying is, let's go find food together. Let's go learn how to grow some food, metaphorically and really. Let's figure this out together. And their dignity and their worth is affirmed as they are partners and seen as even experts in solving their own problems and struggles. So that is all I have. I know that I talked quickly, probably, but I know it's been a long afternoon, and so I think I did pretty good. That was pretty quick. Questions? I want to give you any questions that you may have. Go.
He was first.
Okay, that's quick. That's a quick one.
I was just going to ask regarding the asset map.
Uh-huh.
How you determine those assets? What made you decide that the market was what those assets need? I mean, you got those restaurants, you got all that. Is that?
It's not. So the market. Did you say? Okay. Wait. Could you reframe your question?
So you're trying to you did the asset map to kind of find out to listen.
Yeah.
Is that to what that block needed? What was it telling you? Based on, what did you determine from that? Other than, I just got lost in the fact that you've got all you've determined all these assets,
Yeah.
and maybe you weren't going to go that deep into what you're going to do with them. But
Okay. So there's two different things. Okay. You can do an asset map just to do an asset map to understand the community and to know all the assets, and you start to look through a different lens. Rather than saying, oh, I'm moving here because it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, it has this problem, this problem, this problem. Those things are true, but we want to tell the other story and say, oh, it has this, it has this, it has several of these. How can then, the next step is to connect those assets and say, hey, how can we work together? There's 29 churches, some of them right across the street from each other. How are they working together? Are they all just doing their own thing, or are we connecting and collaborating? If there's schools and a church together, once you map them on a physical map, you see, oh, there's 2 churches next to this one school, that has these needs. How can these 2 churches partner with this school? It makes sense. Let's make this work. Let's get them together. Let's connect them. Now, the way that we approach it, then we listened to the community, and they said they want a grocery store. All right, so that was the first thing. We didn't do an asset map. We listened to the community, had neighborhood meetings. 77% of them said we want and need a grocery store. So that's what we began to work on based on their need. Well, then a grocery store is not very profitable, and there's a reason there's not a big chain grocery store in the area, because it's not very profitable, and they don't want to put a grocery store there. That's not going to make money. And there's other reasons. And so we need to say, well, how can a grocery store be sustained? How can it continue to? How can the community sustain this? And so then we begin to identify. We ask the community, what are some assets? Where do you go for food, or what do you perceive as central to the community? What are the institutions, the individuals, the organizations that are in the community that you see are strengths? And so we determined, okay, schools, locally owned food businesses could be customers of the store. They could buy their onions and tomatoes for their tacos and whatever. And they also have a vested interest in the community. They're part of the community. Churches have a vested interest in the community. They can be customers and supporters, employers. Employees. So you begin to, that's how you identify. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, my question's similar. So maybe you have an example of how you take the asset map and you connect these, churches and schools and businesses and whatever to have like a successful endeavor.
Right. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, or, maybe you have an example of of a successful endeavor?
Okay. Well, I know how, so me personally haven't done that, I have not personally done that, taken that step. In this instance, we're about to take that next step of connecting the assets. And so we made recommendations to the agency saying, here's your assets. One thing that we discovered is of the 29 churches, only 2 of them support Mission Waco financially or have a relationship with them. So we're saying, look, there's 27. Are you reaching out? Why is this? Why? So when you identify your strengths, you also, that gives rise to some gaps. But it's a different approach. You're not starting with the gaps. You're starting with the strengths and then saying, oh, there's nothing going on right here. And so, but how do you connect them? You need community. That's where community organizing becomes important. And having conversations. That's where living in the community makes sense. So the next step is to go to those 40 local businesses, food businesses, and say, hey, you've probably heard, but we're starting a grocery store. What are your thoughts on that? And do you see yourself partnering in any way, with that? How do you see making this a success? Do you want to make it a success? And having a conversation with that, or having community meetings where you get together. So it's a very relational kind of organic process where you begin to connect. I'm trying to think. I know there's really there's examples. I'm trying to think of.
You can answer later if you
Yeah.
think of an example
Yeah, I will.
later.
I
'Cause,
will.
yeah.
Sure. And there's tons of them out there. I mean, I won't put her on the spot, but Kit Danley, I know, has done. You've made use of asset maps and things in your work, haven't you?
Yeah.
So can I put you on the spot? I'm sorry. When does the connection piece, you identify the assets, how then do you leverage that?
So I do teach asset mapping in a variety of situations. So once you gather your assets, that's your first step. But in doing that, you're really doing a lot of analysis along the way. So an asset, it's not just putting pins on the map, you're actually encountering these people. So kind of like these testimonies that happened today, you start to hear people's story and you start to connect the dots. Okay, you do this or you do that, or I wonder if you know this, and all of a sudden things start to bubble up and start to emerge. And so as you're doing analysis along the way, you're collecting that. And so I'm actually getting ready to do this process with some churches that have been doing, it's usually about a 6-month process. And then you come together and you do some deep analysis. Basically, you connect the dots even further. Who did we meet? What are they doing? How is it kind of promoting our end game or our cause, which in the case is trying to build a sustainable grocery store. And some other gaps have emerged. Strong assets, and you think, oh, for example, if you're going down a trail and it's you're not sure if you have a food desert or not, or if a grocery store is really needed, and you end up doing all your asset mapping and you say, no, that's not what this community needs. What the community is speaking to us about is something entirely different. And then a gap emerges, and so that's the next step. The next step is after the analysis, you're basically asking, what role do we play, if any? The community is stronger than we thought, it's more vibrant than we thought, it's got tons of things going on for it. This one gap, or these few gaps have emerged, is that a role we play? Is that a good fit for us? Is that where our strengths are? So you take your analysis, and then you start to ask yourself some hard questions. Well, we're an asset, right? We're in our community, let's call ourselves an asset. That's not a bad thing, that's not being promoting or proud. What role do we play? And then you really, in some ways, go right back to square one, because now you're going back to some of those key folks. And you're basically asking them, do you think that's a good fit for us? So the analysis leads to kind of the now what, but then you really have to go back and you have to kind of address the now what, because even though the now what makes sense on paper, maybe we can't afford it, maybe it requires a whole lot of other players in the picture in order to get it done, and that type of thing. So that's kind of the staging of it. What I try to do is say the next really big piece after asset mapping is really drilling down on what does it mean to be a partner. Not just with the community, but obviously it's going to take, for example, building a grocery store. How many other players are going to be needed in that scenario in order for a grocery store to be birthed? And are there some natural players that have now surfaced after the asset mapping, or do we have to go look for them? So what are the partnerships that are going to require in order for that gap to be filled, for us to play our role, and for the others to play their role? Does that make sense?
It does. And so the grocery store isn't quite built yet. It's just, we've determined that is what the community wants.
Yes.
And so what's the next step now?
The next
You made the
step
asset map.
is to raise the money, and to, which can also be, these assets can help with that raising of the money. For instance, so the approach that we're taking is we're doing shares. So we've determined, okay, it's going to cost $400,000 to get this thing on the road and employ people for a year, startup costs and all that. What we're selling shares. They don't get a return on investment, but you own a piece of the store and you have ownership in it. And so now we look, okay, there's 10 schools, there's a total of 500 school teachers and faculty at these schools. They have most of them have a heart for the neighborhood. So that's who we talk to first and say, hey, we're bringing in this grocery store that is going to bring fresh food, reduce obesity, increase the concentration of your students because they have good, healthy food and access to it. How can we partner together? Are you interested in, we're selling membership. We're going to like a Costco Sam's Club type thing, tiers of membership, so we'll offer memberships to them at discounted rates. It's a relational kind of organic process where once the key is you got to identify your assets. If you don't know that, the people that spoke today, if you don't know they exist, which most people don't, because they're just doing work in quiet, unseen corners, then you don't know who to talk to, and it's a snowball effect. As I talk to Enrique, who knows, Joanne, who knows Lydia, all of a sudden their network snowball, and you're like, oh, and out of that comes 10 people, what's happened in the grocery store is we've got former produce managers from Walmart coming out of the woodwork based on relationships as we had conversations, and they say, hey, I want to help, can I help train someone in the neighborhood to run the produce? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not giving a super clear answer because it's kind of an organic, messy process.